Good afternoon, and thank you for joining the Australian Institute of Disaster Resilience and the Australian Red Cross for our 5th webinar in the Recovery Uncovered series on leadership, mentorship, and community-led recovery. I'm Erin Pally, and I'm the National Manager at Australian Red Cross for Recovery, and I'm really happy to be your host for today. I'd like to start by acknowledging that I'm hosting this event from the lands of the Wiradjuri people in the Kulin Nation. I'd like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional custodians of the various lands in which you're all joining from today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating on the webinar this afternoon. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing culture and connection to lands and waterways across Australia. Before we begin, I have some brief housekeeping notes. We are recording today and the recording will be made available on the ADAR website after the event. We will be using the Q&A function, which is right down the bottom next to the chat. So if you want to put questions in to ask our panelists today, all you have to do is pop it in the Q&A function, not the chat. And then other people can upvote. So if you just click the thumbs up button, and at about 1:30, I'll do my best to ask a number of those questions of our panelists. I encourage you to use the chat window to share your thoughts and ideas or reflections during the presentations, but just a reminder to please be respectful of each other and really make sure we're looking after each other and our presenters when posting and commenting today. So this is the 5th webinar of the Recovery Uncovered series presented by the Disaster Recovery Mentors, which is hosted by Australian Red Cross and ADAR. The Disaster Recovery Mentors program is coordinated by Australian Red Cross and aims to support disaster-affected communities, their leaders and practitioners who support them in their recovery. This series has been designed to provide you with insights into disaster recovery from a community perspective. You can look at previous recordings on the ADAR website, and that'll be put in the chat during the presentation. Today's session, we are so lucky to be joined by disaster recovery mentor Malcolm Hackett and the former president of the Sarsfield Renewal Association, Simon Hof. We'll be going through the tips and tricks around getting organised after a disaster in and amongst all the chaos, establishing structures and effective governance, ensuring effective representation. I reckon Simon and Malcolm have got a lot to talk about in terms of competing timelines, achieving consensus, and the politics of decision-making after a disaster. And then I guess sort of really focusing on maintaining momentum and managing succession after the grueling thing we find ourselves in that is life after a disaster. I'll just introduce Malcolm and Simon. Malcolm Hackett is a retired teacher and school principal with 34 years of service in the Victorian government schools. After losing his home and farm in 2009 Black Saturday bushfires, Malcolm became the chair of the Strathewen Bushfire Renewal Association, and they developed a democratic and community-led approach to recovery out of what was a pretty horrendous time in Australia's history. Joining Malcolm is Simon Hof, who is joining us as a volunteer and former president of the Sarsfield Community Association, who have been supporting the community of Sarsfield around their emerging recovery needs and advocating for what the community has deemed important in their recovery. I'd like you all to join me in welcoming both Malcolm and Simon to share their insights and their hard-won wisdoms with us today. Thank you. Malcolm, I can see you're talking, but you're on mute.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thanks for that introduction and introducing us to that notion of some stages. This isn't a PhD analysis. It's from my experience. It seems to me that communities go through some stages after a bushfire as they head into that community-led recovery. And so talking about that, but also talking about how a mentor might assist there is what we're going to do a bit of. It seems to me the first thing that happens to you is you go through a what the hell just happened stage. There's lots of trauma. Neighbours are helping one another. Things are unclear. There's local supports and agencies start coming in, focusing on those immediate relief needs. And people are really trying to work out both personally and for their community what happened. And then for whatever reason, there's a we better get organised stage, which it takes a bit of time to develop. Perhaps there's existing community groups that are still intact, and they may start thinking about that, or they may want to get a conversation going. And then in our case, and in Sarsfield's too, there's we better establish our legitimacy. Who says that we can speak for the community? Who's actually going to listen to us if we do? And in that stage, if you're really lucky, you've got local government. You may have the bushfire authorities who actually see value in what you're doing, and they'll assist you through that process. After that sort of what are we going to do stage, if you've been inclusive and democratic and you've engaged with your community, you've been lots of communication, I think, gathering ideas and feedback about actually developing a plan. And that becomes the focus of most of your efforts. But while you're doing that, at the same time, there's all this other work, because you've got to maintain that engagement. You're worried about the community's well-being, and you're trying to have a concern for everyone. And it's really hard work, and it takes lots of people doing it. If you're really lucky, finally, you get a plan together for how you intend to proceed with your community and the levels of support that you're going to need. And if you're lucky, it'll be recognised, supported and funded. And about this stage, your committee is fatigued from all the mental and emotional work, not to mention the personal stresses that people have been going through on their own path to recovery. And it can be made even more torturous if there's difficulties with authorities. And so there can be a bit of baked-in frustration and cynicism. But if you're lucky, you'll get what you were after. And that then is when, having done all of this other work, is when the new work starts, where you've got to get the energy to go in to implement that plan. Simon, tell us about what happened in the what the hell just happened phase. I believe you were heavily involved in the local CFA brigade, and other people, including your wife Tiana, took up that community recovery role. Can you tell us about that, the groups and the individuals involved, and how they got organised?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Malcolm. Guess just wanted to start by saying it's great to be here. This is probably the pinnacle of my imposter syndrome. You don't sign up to be in a place like this, but it's quite overwhelming to see so many people join and want to hear mine and Malcolm's story. Yeah, the sun comes up the next day after fire comes through your town. In my case, there's almost 1 in 4 houses lost in our town, and people are just, like you say, Malcolm, stumbling around, not knowing what the heck to do. I guess in our story here in Sarsfield, people were stumbling around, and it's kind of downhill towards the hall, and they sort of just ended up at the hall, at our community hall, and they didn't know why. There was roads were blocked, you couldn't get in and out. the hall seemed like the only community place to be, and some people were on the committee and they unlocked the hall, and that's really where the whole thing took off for Sarsfield. I guess winding the clock back to before the fires, though, one of the interesting things about the Sarsfield community is it over the years had slowly become kind of a satellite town of the next big town, if you like. So Bensdale is the big kind of regional centre near us, and people in Sarsfield, just through no plan or no desire, just became disconnected. We used to have a school, we used to have a cricket club, we used to have lots of pubs even back in the gold rush days, but slowly over time all those things closed. And so the people that we were working with weren't established organisations or anything like that. They were just individuals from the community who wanted to help. Some were outside the fire footprint, some were inside, but really just people mucked in together, and those different skills that we had, professionals, doers, tradies, the whole works, that's who we were working with from the get-go in our recovery.
I believe the possibility of having a mentor was suggested or offered via the Red Cross project manager. Do you know much about why the Sarsfield CRC, that original group, decided to investigate that idea?
I have to say, I caught my wife for about 20 minutes last night to try and get the backstory on this, and it's interesting what gets minuted and what gets discussed and what gets lost over time, and there isn't really a lot of records about how that decision was made. It would appear it came up through our place manager at council, so that was one of the original early on things put in place to support the Sarsfield community, was a place manager based at council. And yeah, it seems she said it was a good idea, and look, I wasn't there then, but I think it's one of the most fantastic things that's been part of our recovery journey, is having a mentor like yourself, Malcolm.
Thanks, Simon. Just so people watching get a sense of that, Strathewen similarly are sort of a satellite town on the urban fringe of Melbourne, and used to be a farming community, but most is sort of a dormitory township with people heading out to work, and those sorts of things were seen to be similar between Strathewen and Sarsfield, and one that those similarities were one of the reasons that that I was suggested as a mentor. But it was other people that made that judgment about whether we'd suit one another. That idea was floated with me in May of 2020, that there were a number of communities in the area, but it was only Sarsfield that actually took that up. And our first meeting was by Zoom, and I would have travelled down there, but then we had our second COVID lockdown, and so from then on, most of our interactions were conducted by Zoom. And I would have, if anyone had asked me before that, I would have expected that was about the worst way to start a relationship with a committee as a mentor, because distance, it's about 4 hours away, so difficult to get there anyway for me. And the COVID just reinforced the problem, but it didn't work out that way. Why do you think we were able to develop that relationship and support via Zoom?
It's a really good question. I guess part of it's from necessity, but I also think probably one of the cool things, one of the things that I'm really proud of our community group, is just a generally inclusive sort of nature. So, you know, this wasn't in the early days, but later on we had someone who got ill and really wanted to contribute. The house burnt down, they left the town, they're in that next town, Bairnsdale, and we just really wanted them to be able to have a say. And in fact, that person got MND and couldn't talk, and we still wanted him to be part, so he could use the chat function within a Zoom call or a Microsoft Teams call. So I think that was a kind of a founding principle for the group, that we all make it work, whether you're in the room or somewhere else, and really held us in good stead, because quite quickly that was all we could do. And yeah, I think also there was this big wave of like, this has to work. We have to make it work. There was such a euphoric momentum of our early days community events that were just completely organic, people coming together, and there was just this real wave coming in that we had to sort of make it work, and the technology was really part of that. We also had some great people who came with those skills. You know, someone was smart enough to write to Microsoft and say, give these guys free access to Teams and OneDrive and Word and Excel and all these things that are kind of the backbones, the tech backbones that make these things work in that kind of environment. Not that there was a rule book on how to do that. We also leverage other technology like WhatsApp groups because some people hated emails. Just, I guess, leaning in to try and make it work for everyone was a core principle for us.
I think that what you said about inclusiveness, and certainly that was one of the hallmarks of Strathewen's efforts, was to communicate with everyone that we could, and take the communication seriously, because you've got people who feel like they belong, but they can't be there anymore because they don't have anywhere to live. All of those sorts of things seem to me to be just so fundamental. And really, it's only a community-based organisation that can make that work as well as it did. So you did a fantastic job, I think. There were lots of community events and they were well supported. When the idea of an association was raised as opposed to just the CRC, how was that received and how did you go about explaining it?
So just to be fully upfront, this was before my official time, and so I'm kind of talking through my wife here, but yeah, I guess I've reaped the benefits of her hard work getting involved after we sort of swapped the baton. But it was clear, and this experience was lived by other East Gippsland communities, is that the original sort of setup was a subcommittee of a hall committee. Those hall committees have strong ties back to policy and legislation in the state government, and so you couldn't actually act that role. We were kind of going outside of the remit of that group, and so it's kind of a necessity to move to an incorporated association. And so some model rules were stood up around supporting people at times of disaster, advocating for the community, maintaining our natural environment resources, those sorts of things. And yeah, I wasn't foundational in that, but I think that really set us up for success going that way. But it took some time. Like I think the AGM was in November of 2020. The bushfires were they came on the 30th of December 2019. So it takes time to do these things.
I had in my notes that the association came into existence at the end of 2020. So you've really got about a year. And I think it's often people don't recognise how long it takes to get organised and to get organised in the right way. There isn't a blueprint. Your community has to do it for themselves, and it can be a really difficult road because you're learning so much as you go. One of the other things that happens through that period is you have to handle the demands of different levels of government, and even the demands of support agencies and so on. What was that experience like for your committee?
Of course, hindsight's 2020, and you often see the good things in the rear vision mirror, and sometimes not the bad. But if I am in the interest of honesty, I'd like to say it was really hard in the early days. So that we had our AGM, our inaugural AGM. I was elected the president. Kind of the first action I took was to work back through our place manager and get a list of anyone and everyone who could help us. And just starting at the top, every day in my lunch break, I'd ring someone and the next person, and just trying to work out who they were, where they fitted, and were they willing to help us, but also take a bit of a yardstick on, were they a doer? Were they one of these people who were really engaged, or were they sort of part of the system? And I should say some of those people sort of changed over time because you kind of get going in roles once you're there, but you really needed a core group of people to help you. And I think a lot of these people were just trying to find where they fitted in the world, and they were really kind of put back in the seat a bit, that someone would proactively reach out to them and say, how can you help me? Because it's like, okay, now I can do something. Now I've got a moment of inertia to get going. And so I think foundationally that was a really good place to start, is just to build those relationships. And you also really want to know the time element, because there's these waves of everyone gets subbed in from existing structures in government and things to help, and then they go and there's people employed, and then there's their contracts in. You sort of got to have that idea of how long someone's around to help for, so you can make sure if they're a doer, if they're willing to get you there where you need to go, don't want to burn them out. We want to work with them while you can, sort of thing. But it was hard. Recovery's hard, but it's incredibly rewarding.
I was shocked actually that after 2009, that was our experience. And I assumed naively that lots of things would have been learned about how to do that. And it still sounded very cobbled together, even though all these people come in with goodwill and good intentions. It's as though the systems and the structures are working against one another to foil those good intentions.
Yeah, it can seem that way. Some people get bound by a structure or a framework or whatever it might be, and some people are happy to push the edges of those things. And some barriers are perceived and some are real, and it didn't help that it was just really murky, and there wasn't like a go to A and then go to B and go to C. But if you have the right attitude, you find the right people to give you a hand, you can still get really good work done. And it needs to keep some nuance, because what worked in Strathewen might not work in Sarsfield, might not even work in Clifton Creek, which is our next door town. So those sort of rule books, playbooks need to have that bit of flex as well to be able to work in the community-led recovery sense.
Because lots of people are interested in this idea of a mentor, but were there occasions, I can't think of any myself, but were there occasions when you were trying to work through that where either that Strathewen experience or having a mentor was a useful thing?
Of course, this is a bit awkward when you're interviewing me about this, Malcolm, but I would like to take this opportunity just to say how fantastic you were and are as a mentor. Everyone has their own style and brings their own style to these sorts of things, and yours is definitely very passive, here to help when you need it, but not here to tell you how to do it. And that's been really amazing for us, because I opened up saying you feel like you're an imposter, and so when you're trying to push forward and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing here, but it seems like it's what the community wants, I'm going to go. Sometimes you just like get to a threshold and you're like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. And you start to lean back. That's where I felt like you've been there to just put your hands on my back and go, no, mate, it's all right. This is what happened to us. Have a go. And yeah, most times you push straight through that. People get on the bus and really try and give you a hand. And that's really valuable. I don't know, there's some movie out there where there's a character that doesn't say anything for the whole movie, and then the last 3 lines they say, what do you think, such and such, and he just gives this big speech about this really meaningful stuff. That's a bit like you in our meetings too. So Malcolm often doesn't say a lot, and someone says, Malcolm, there's your wake, he's having a beer. And you'll chime something in that's just like validates everything we're doing, plus like a 10% of would you think about this as well. And it's just so great, really, really affirming for us that we're doing the right thing and we're on the right track, and we're not sending the community to rack and ruin.
Let's move on to have a talk about your community plan. I reckon that Sarsfield's community engagement and the development of that plan were exemplary, and partly because there's all these outside demands to juggle, and you're trying to get the ideas from people and then distill them into something to create this. It has to be a compelling proposal that you're going to put before decision makers, because they're going to stick money to it. And you have to do this while you're managing all these other things, people's well-being and on all the rest of it. And it's a huge job. And Sarsfield did seem to go about it in a stunning way. Do you want to describe what you did and what you achieved there?
Yeah, so it's sort of put to us that you needed a community plan to progress and sort priorities, sort the wheat from the chaff, and all these sorts of things. And a lot of the people in the original group saw the value in that. What it looked and felt like, there was a spectrum of views, I guess. But I guess what I brought, I hope, as the president around the time we were drafting this, is just the importance of consultation and genuine consultation. So, we sort of have a policy in Sarsfield that we don't want, well, we would love a survey result from every single person, 600, 550 people, depending on which ABS sentence you take. But that's not realistic. But if everyone in the community, one, knew about that consultation opportunity, and there was an opportunity, a way for them to contribute, whether that be, maybe you don't like to go to meetings, so there's an online option. Maybe you don't have the skills to write, so there's an option to meet in person with someone and give you that's what we really tried to do to build in that inclusiveness. So that's really where it started, is this consultation. You get a list, you get a long list, then you work on taking that list and turning it into priorities, and there's some workshopping in there, I guess, to pull that off. But then I guess when you're turning that into a plan, it's a real tightrope to walk on. One side, it has to be digestible to the community and make sense and resonate. And so it's written in their language, if you like. But on the other side, and this is where it can become really powerful, it needs to be aligned enough to, the Bushfire Recovery Victoria pillars of recovery, which happened to be a thing at the time. So you're sort of trying to mush those two things together, which sort of, if I'm being honest, sometimes kind of bash against each other. They don't really want to line up, even though they should. It's the whole idea. But we tried to make a plan that kind of covered all those things. And one of the ways that we made it more meaningful for the community too was to actually create a subset of a plan. So a short form plan, something that just lived on the wall and people could sort of see when they're having at a community meal, and kind of just organically digest it. And then a long form plan, which spelled out item by item all the things that we wanted to do. And look, we're doing a community plan review at the moment. We're coming into sort of the 5th year of Sarsfield 2030. And it's amazing to see all the successes. And I don't know if it wasn't really good planning. Maybe it was, but just so many of the things are just falling out as happening anyway. And I think the reason for that is because it started from a foundation of being the community's priorities. So because we weren't trying to bend them to fit something, even though we weren't sleeping with this plan beside our bed and getting up each day going, okay, we need to get on to line 6, because those priorities came from the community in the first place. When we started to do them, it was just like kind of happening organically, if you like. The other key thing that Sarsfield did that deviated from some of our neighbours and friends was we called it Sarsfield 2030, and we tried to leverage this idea of the community coming back together and becoming a community again, if you like. So, if it was a bushfire recovery plan, it's about a point in time. It's about a subset of people in the community who are directly impacted. Whereas calling it Sarsfield 2030 is a forward-looking thing, and it's about everyone's got a stake in the future of our community.
That's a beaut spot for me to inject my notion there. We in Strathewen, we were really opposed isn't the right word, but the word recovery as a recovery plan, it just didn't sit well with us, because we wanted more. So we called our association a renewal association. We wanted something to be better than what we had before. There was no way we were going to get what we had before, because everything had burned. You just described, I think, really clearly those same sentiments that we put into our plan and into our name. I was trying to think of things. What were things that might have transferred or been useful from Strathewen, and taking your point about not everything is useful everywhere. but we did that. I think the first time I visited, I took everything I had, and one of the things that was taken up was the idea of an expo. Now ours was on rebuilding homes. You took up that idea of an expo and turned it into something pretty mammoth. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, I guess there's a kind of a catch-all general rule here is if someone's had a good idea, yeah, steal it and make it your own, because if someone's done the heavy lifting, then and it's been a success, then there's a reasonable chance that it could work for you. But yeah, always try and twist it to land how you think it should with your community. So yeah, we had a bushfire expo. It was quite well, not in the year after, but the second year after the fires was sort of around the time that a lot of, I don't know, the base stuff that had been done at people's homes. They had fences back up. Some of the people were staying to build houses. So there was some of this thinking about your own resilience. And I think one of the things that resonated as well with the expo was, one of the things you learn when a bushfire comes to town is, there's 100 houses and 10 fire trucks. Well, actually, the ratio is probably much less than that. It might be 500 houses and 10 fire trucks. So on some level, you have to have some resilience no matter what. And we kind of really identified with that. It's not railing against people and we're on our own and we can look after ourselves, but it's that, this is a learning and people want to be able to build on that and, be better the next time a fire came. So yeah, we had lots of different systems there around cladding and vets to talk about what you do with animals and different cool and weird and wonderful systems that can help protect your home. But it was just a really overwhelming positive vibe at the day after a really crappy time where people are standing up and starting to think about doing those things, and the suppliers were there to ask the questions at the right time. Yeah, a great idea that we stole from Strathewen.
The community plan is kind of pivotal. It's a central thing that you created. But in working through lots of those things, you're working to other people's timelines and their priorities. What sort of things happen with that process that caused difficulties for you? And I know one of them was it got derailed right at the end, but there must have been other things along the way about what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do.
Yeah, there's a real push and pull of timing and the whole your community's on their own journey and they're ready to go when they're ready to go. And you talk to the people who are supporting you and they're like, yeah, no, that's what this community recovery is all about. But then actually laid over the top of this other priorities and other timeframes. If we go back right to the start, there's just literally individuals that want to come and get in their car and bring a shovel and a wheelbarrow and help out. But the people in the houses aren't ready for that yet because they're just walking around in the days trying to work out which way's up and down. So, if you could sort of sneak that down the road a little bit and leverage that would be really helpful. The same thing with money, like big money for community projects. Governments want to be seen to doing something. And so if you, fast track a plan and whip something up, you've got a really good chance of getting cash early on. But if you don't do the consultation, if you don't check in with your community, if you're not coming up with a plan that they're endorsed, there's some real risks there that you put a white elephant in the landscape or whatever. And so, I remember when the last round of the local economic recovery grants, LER grants, were announced, and I rang the lady and I'm like, we've just engaged someone to do a concept design for our hall. We want them to do the process because then on the end, we'll have some sort of firm cost of what a new hall will cost. What do you think we should do? And she goes, I'm sorry, Simon, this is the last round. I know you said we could wait and, the process will come along with you. But there is literally opportunities that come and go because of these sort of cycles. And it's really hard because you get the community spun up that this amazing thing's going to happen. And all the while you're going, oh, crap, I just hope there's that next opportunity that we're not missing out here. So, and the saga, which is the very last one, which maybe you're going to get to in a second, Malcolm, is quite interesting, but a good news story in the end.
Well, yeah. I mean, that, after all that work, including lots of consultation with government, um, and it got derailed again because of the rules, the regulations.
Yeah, I mean, I can smile about this now, but it was an unbelievable thing for our community to endure. So we kind of, to set the scene, we've done a community plan, we've done a master plan. We only have one community space in Sarsfield, which is our hall. There's another sort of bit of public land that's not well looked after, that could be kind of looked after, but really the key asset for us is our hall. So unsurprisingly, the community said, do something with that. We're already coming here for meals. We already love this place. Make this better, and this will be the launching sort of point for the rest of the future of the community. So it's like quite a lot of pressure. So yeah, we community plan, a master plan, a concept design. We worked with a special landscape architect who delivered projects in our Melbourne Botanical Gardens, all these amazing things that just get people so excited. Finally, a grant came around that fitted the bill. It was a national grant. It even had Bushfire Black Summer in the name. And we're just like, righto, this is it. That's our one horse. We're on. We've put all our effort in. We're finally ready. Pay someone a whole bunch of money to write a grant application. Then you go and rewrite the grant application yourself anyway, and you submit it. Bang, we are set. And of course, big grants like that, they take a long time to be announced. And the time came when there was an announcement. There wasn't fanfare and ministers straight away. There was a list posted up online. And I remember going down to the hall to look at this with the community, and we're just scrolling through. And we're like, get to the end, and it's like, Sarsfield's not there. What the hell? Heck, there was a hall, miles away from the fire footprint, who got $300,000 to repaint. Great thing to do. But like, how could you fund that and not our whole project? Like, we just, anyway, another 48 hours went by, and we realised that we were deemed ineligible for the grant because we took a strategic decision at the application stage. There was two groups in Sarsfield, a hall committee who's run by the state government, and then the Sarsfield Community Association, who should apply. Well, we thought because the hall looks after the place, they should apply. They were ineligible for the grant, but they didn't tell us. Unbelievable. If that meeting went the other way and this group applied, bang, you would have been eligible, could have got it. So we just decided this wasn't fair, and we just went on a journey to fight the federal government, and eventually we got our $3.7 million project funded. But there was a change of government in there, and we had a deal. We had a letter from Barnaby Joyce. You've got your money. And then like literally 4 weeks later, he was out of a job and a whole new government to fight against. But we just picked it all up again. We came up with a hashtag, what about Sarsfield? Fought, and we got there, and we're currently in the throes of trying to build this hall, which is a whole nother saga, but we're getting close.
There's another one of those spots where I want to claim a little bit of kudos. I remember that was the most painful committee meeting, because people were, well, weren't angry. They were sad, just plain sad, because where do you go with this? And then you were told they'll look at it in a month, and there's all the politics of that's going on in Canberra at the time, and about whether the money was coming out of slush fund money or whether it was real money, all sorts of stuff. And I left the meeting thinking, they're thinking in terms of waiting a month. And I remember we spoke, and I said, this is not a bad thing. You've got a month to get organised. And I think that campaign that you waged was fabulous. So I'm going to claim a little bit of glory in there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, and that's bushfire recovery too. Like, if you don't get empowered, you don't think to ask, the whole thing could have just died because we're like, oh well, we tried. So close, not going to happen. And holy moly, like this whole wave of community coming together, it just, it wouldn't have just fizzled out and died instantly, but it really would have changed the course of the thing. So yeah, a little push, like I said, I was stepping back there, and Malcolm's just gone, no, you take this on, you own this. You know, it's not hard to write an email or call a radio station or talk to a few journalists. And yeah, it was amazing what we achieved.
Now you've got that money, and it's getting on to 5 years after the fire. And if anyone was trying to build a house at the moment, they'd know that the longer you leave it, the more the costs go up and all sorts of. What's happened to the community in terms of what they're going to be able to do with the money they've got, and what sort of blocking things of holding things up?
Oh, well, look, I really felt like the project was bulletproof. If we looked at our neighbours up the road, people went to market to grants programs with much higher level pieces of work, and we went to that next level, got another design, had a commercial cost estimate done. Look, bloody COVID killed everything. I mean, anyone on the call would know that prices just went bonkers in the building industry, and despite us delivering many of the things on the master plan ourselves and always kind of, doing it less than we got money for. So we're able to deliver a toilet block ourselves, tennis court upgrade, cricket net upgrade, we build a shed, all these things that take money off what it costs to do the job. Sadly, we're in a position now where this amazing playground designed by the children of Sarsfield, it's really line ball whether we can afford the whole thing. And it's such a shame, because the community just came on that journey and believed and engaged in the consultation and the design. And it's not done yet. We'll fight for the last bits to get it done. But yeah, I just worry that my kids might be driving cars by the time the playground's in the ground.
You mentioned early on that when you were giving us that background to Sarsfield, that it used to have lots of community centred things, and really now there's it was at the stage of just having the hall. What has all this work done in terms of reinvigorating the identity of Sarsfield?
Yeah, I remember someone made a comment, I can't remember where, like more decisions have been made about Sarsfield in the last sort of 4 years than have been in the last 40 years. It's one of those things where you stop for a second and go, holy moly, yeah, maybe that's the case. But what's fantastic to see, I just had a whinge about COVID, but COVID also had positive things. So people who were in the city locked up decided they want to move to the regions. So we've got lots of new people coming through. So, legacy-wise, getting new people involved, getting new ideas, being open to change, being pretty flexible, I think that's a big part of, the community development, the community sort of going forward. But yeah, I've got, I don't know, kind of big dreams. There's lots of people with young families here. Like, why couldn't you have a play group at our new hall, or mothers group, and these sorts of things? And if people get involved at that stage and they get a genuine and physical connection to a place like that, that's the future for me. Because they had the 3-year-old birthday. Now the kid's 13 and I'm on the committee, so I might as well hire the hall for the 13-year-old. That's what I think could be achieved here. Where it goes, who knows? But it's definitely just so much positivity, and it's really at the forefront at the moment because we're doing this plan review. Just all the things, over 1,000 events put on, including things from yoga twice a week through to big expos like we talked about. But yeah, I really hope that just keeps going, and that the renewal of people and fresh faces, it won't stay the same. It's going to change, but just as long as it keeps going in the right way and doesn't ever kind of start to walk back to the disconnected community who drive to Bairnsdale to see their friends.
One of the most difficult challenges of a community recovery, I think, is succession. One of the things that you do really well is demonstrate to people how much work there is to do. and how much commitment you have to make, and that can be a bit off-putting, I think. And we had a few small successes in Strathewen, but mostly we struggled, I think. And I reckon that you've been incredibly successful, and I suspect it's got a lot to do with your approach. Simon, I wondered if you might tell us a bit about what the committee's done and what you've done to make that happen.
Yeah, I'd be very reluctant to own it myself, but I think as a group we coalesced around an idea of empowerment. On a personal level, it's funny, we were reflecting on this session before it that, you know, how did we get here and all this sort of stuff. Sometimes I have corporate kind of, you know, job interviews or whatever, and people say, oh, you know, who's your mentor in management or whatever? And I say that's a truck driver from Clifton Creek called Digger, who was the ex-captain of our fire brigade. And he is just this man who's amazing at delegation, amazing at empowerment. It's so subtle and so natural, you don't even realize it's happening. And so he'll just push you into a place where he knows you're safe, but just there's a little bit of stretch there for you. And next thing you know, you're running fires and driving big red trucks around and, you know, saving the world or whatever. But you kind of didn't know it was happening because of the way he goes about it. And I guess for me, that's something I've tried to bring to people is, one, find something they're really passionate about and let them scratch that itch. And that could be, you know, there's a lady who's just super passionate about road safety. And so we've just let her go. She's talking to Vic Police. She's talking to the politicians. You know, she's advocating for all these kinds of changes that she's got community backing for. It's in our plan and those sorts of things. And she's checking back through the group. So she's not kind of going off the reservation, so to speak. But, you know, find those people, let them do good, and eventually they'll be like, oh, wow, you know, I was able to have that meeting with a politician. I never thought I could do that. Maybe I could be the assistant treasurer or something like that. And that's really what's sort of seen some great churn of roles. So people have been able to be mentored into a role and then do the role and then move on. And yeah, I don't know, just don't be too rigid. Don't think you have to have a really hard process to get from A to B. If you've got 3 jobs, you can do it 3 different ways. If you've got 3 people engaged, that's a really good outcome. And people generally are really open to that. Some people like structure and things to be a certain way, and you can find roles for them too, which live in that place. But I think that's part of succession is people feeling like they've got some ownership, feeling like they're making a meaningful contribution, and you give them that little bit of a stretch and see where it goes. Some people back away and say, no, too much, I'm done. But you only need a subset of those people you're sort of trying to empower to take the next step, and then that's where succession starts to happen, I think.
I have noticed in the case of your committee too, that when some people have had to withdraw or move on, other people have then stood up to fill those roles, which has been interesting as well.
Sometimes you have to create a void to get someone to fill the void. Totally. Yep.
Now I've filled you for a while, but are there any things you want to ask me?
It's interesting. This is not on the playbook here, but
no.
Yeah, I'd be keen for any genuine reflections as we come into 5 years on the journey for us and the synergies between you guys and us, and yeah, what good and bad of the things we've sort of been through on the journey. I see the key difference between Sarsfield and Strathewen, tragically, is the loss of life in the community, and that's where there's been some difference, but there's also so much commonality there that we've been able to leverage and build upon. But yeah, do you have any reflections on that end to end?
Yeah, you're right about that the loss of life in Strathewen. And one of the things, of course, that it interfered enormously with the timelines is that the Bushfire Authority at the time wanted us to have a plan by a certain point, and lots of people in the community were still going to funerals. They were, as the coroner released bodies, it went on for a very long while, and so that how you get started and how much grief there is, that certainly was a difference. And I think I've said this to you, I've been really cheered by seeing people grow in the roles on the committee. And as I see it, I think, oh, that's what we were like. That's how we grew. That's how we started to advocate. And so one of the things that working with Sarsfield has done for me is it's reinforced that idea that probably most communities could do this. They could lead their own recovery with the right sorts of support. The people are there and they will come forward. And it does seem to me that usually these are positive people of goodwill who understand that you're going to need to do it together. So that I have found that really encouraging, seeing the way Sarsfield has how the committee has grown and the way the community has rallied around the plan and all that sort of stuff. It makes me think that, yeah, these things are possible anywhere. One of the things that I think we had a lot of support from both our council and the Bushfire Authority from the personnel, put it that way. The systems often could be a bit clunky, but the lots of the people who were really committed to supporting us, I've observed those same people in your situation when we have meetings and there's people online or they come to those meetings. Yeah, there are those people are out there, and I'm assuming they're everywhere too. They need those opportunities to step up. But often the systems don't let them, and they don't let them by having things like short-term contracts or moving them within departments and forgetting all the people that are relying on their support or have been. Those sorts of things can just be so frustrating for a community trying to lead its recovery. But yes, I have huge admiration for your committee and the way you've worked and the growth in the people. And I'll expect to see some of them, including you, acting as mentors for other people sometime in the future, I think. You'd be a good one.
Yeah, there's a sales pitch.
Yeah.
So I think it comes down to people, and you're going to get different people depending on where you are. You get connected to groups at another level. So there was community recovery committees at a township level, but then we used to meet as a region. And it was really interesting, the difference between different places. Some places had more retirees, so they had more manpower during the day. Other, like us, we tended to be less retirees and more professionals who couldn't do as much during the day. Doesn't mean you can't get the same outcome. It just might happen a bit differently. And equally, back on the people that help you, yeah, they can really make all the difference. Just someone saying, I know it's hard. It doesn't fit exactly with the rules, but I'm going to work with you to try and get this outcome because I know that that's what the community wants, but that's also what the community wants. Yeah, you find those people and you want to hang on to them and try not to burn them out. That's also the challenge. But look, I'm aware that there's a lot of people like that on the call today. And I guess I want to say, one, thank you to anyone who's on the call who did help Sarsfield at any point in time. But also thank you in advance to anyone else who's on the call who might help Sarsfield or a community like Sarsfield, because you guys can make a really, really big difference to communities by what you do, how you go about it, your mindset, and what you bring. And just because you haven't got the same skills as that other doer doesn't mean you can't do. You just got to leverage your skills to make a difference.
Thanks, Simon. I reckon we ought to hand over to you, Erin.
Wow. And I just want to, on the thank you bit, Simon, thank you for the work you've been doing with your community Malcolm, thank you for the support mentoring Sarsfield, but also there's people on the call from Far North Queensland, from Northern New South Wales who are listening in and listening to your reflections of 5 years and then beyond of community recovery, and they're a couple of years into their journey, but they're still so your reflections are sharing with them, and so thank you both for that. There's lots of questions, so I'll start with the sort of most popular ones to begin with, and I think something you started to touch on was about the succession planning and I guess letting people champion their own, like if they were interested in something that was one of the community priorities, letting them do that. And there's a lot of questions here about community anger, community like sort of factions and stuff. So I'm just really interested in both of your reflections about how you manage to keep people together in and amongst the heated, stressful times of recovery.
Perhaps I'll kick it off because we were 2009. That's earlier. One of the most damaging things in our area was that could have exploded was the contempt for the council and, in a sense, the environment. That is to say, trees. Because they were responsible for the loss of homes and the loss of life. The loss of life in terms of trees falling over and blocking roads. Some people suggested that the 13-kilometre drive from Strathewen to Hurstbridge, all the trees should be removed from the side of the road, for example. There was blaming greenies for caring about the bush, all that sort of stuff, and it was there and it was palpable, and it exploded at a council and CFA and bushfire recovery sort of led meeting, which was one of our inspirations for we've got to get back to our own place and away from all this stuff so that we can handle these issues more gently. One of the things that we did when we were handling those issues, well, first of all, was to go to the community to say we think, and the we was the existing community groups and a few others that had participated in these discussions. We think that we should be looking, driving our own recovery, and that we should do this by setting up an incorporated association which people join and they have voting rights on and they elect people into positions and so on. So that was the first part of it. In that sense, everyone's going to have their say. I guess the second part was when we knew if you went to a meeting and everyone was there and you tried to have a discussion about some of these things, that those would be the dominant arguments and they would wreck the meeting, derail them. So when we started talking about these things, instead of having one meeting, we had 6 meetings and they were in different locations. So some people lived in a different suburb, so we had a meeting there. Some people could come to a daytime meeting, so we had a meeting there. So the numbers of people that would be gathered to talk about these issues was reduced. And so it was possible then to have some of those discussions without it turning into a huge community fight. And over time, lots of those divisive issues were put to bed.
Thank you. Simon, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, just firstly to say that's hard. It's really, really hard. And we were possibly through good luck, more so than good management, very fortunate that there wasn't lots of division in our community. I think it stemmed from the whole community breaking down over time and then rebuilding up versus, even our next door neighbours, Clifton Creek, there's two land care groups in a town with, a couple of hundred people. There's a school, a hall committee, a tennis club. They all have their existing views and they have history. We didn't have any of that, which was really fortunate. But when we did find individuals with really passionate views, we just wanted to make sure they had the opportunity to have their say and put that forward. If we could put that passion to good use, we would. And we just tried to make sure it didn't bang up against other things like, keeping trees versus cutting trees down on the roadside, that sort of stuff. But it's not perfect. But I think we were a bit lucky that the community didn't sort of stand up and disengaged from the first place. We kind of mushed together and it kind of made it work. But so, yeah, I think, Malcolm's probably dealt with more of the, people butting horns together than me potentially.
Okay, Erin, I should have said I think one of the things that we applied and so did Sarsfield is that those community gatherings. I mean, ours took place every Friday night for years. People actually coming together and getting to know one another. We thought we knew one another, but you really got to know people or people you just waved to. So coming, in general, there's goodwill. And if you head into these things with goodwill and everyone understands how difficult it is, my experience is that they were able to either put some of those things aside or accommodate different opinions.
Yeah. Thank you. Now, I know you've already sort of touched on this, Simon, and so I'm not going to direct this one at you, but I'm going to direct this to you, Malcolm, about obviously you've been providing mentoring and support to Simon over the last 4 years. What have you personally got out of it? What has been your experience supporting Sarsfield? You're obviously super proud, which makes me super proud, but I'd just like to hear from your perspective.
See, that it's the teacher in me. You're proud of your class, no, there's a sense of it's selfish. It's doing some good with people and seeing them grow and have success. And whether you're part of, I mean, it's terrible, but I've only been to Sarsfield on 3 occasions. I've tried to get there on other occasions and haven't been able to, but it's when I went down for the cricket match, I was welcomed and it was wonderful and we had a great time together and I stayed with some folk and those are some of the rewards as well. That here's a bunch of people in a community that are doing it for themselves and having success. That's a great feeling to be part of that.
Thank you. Simon, what do you think are some of the qualities that make someone a good mentor, but also someone a good recovery worker, volunteer to be in a role like you've been in and those around you?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I go back to something I've already said, which is be you. That's the most important thing. So everyone has strengths and weaknesses, whether we like it or not. And so don't sort of try to be someone else, but think about what you're good at and what you can bring and be the best version of that. And that might not be, you might be paid to do this job, but your skill set's sort of a little bit over to the side here. That can still have amazing outcomes for communities and those sorts of things. So, yeah, try not to think about the barriers of doing things because it must be really hard if you're in council and you've got to get 3 quotes to get that kind of metre work done, and you only have 2 people that want to do the job. And there's it's very easy to come up with the reasons why something's hard, but if you can push that to the side and kind of coalesce around why are we here, why they want to do this, it's for good. Quite quickly you can kind of go, well, we'll best bash through this. We'll find a way. If you have that kind of attitude, that can really change these communities who are kind of a little bit nervous about, we're doing the right thing. The community told us this in the survey, but I'm just Simon. I'm not some sort of guru. That someone standing beside you going, no, we're going to help you. We know you're doing the right thing. We're going to help you get it done. That attitude is really, really powerful, whether it be a mentor or someone you're working with.
Malcolm, did you have anything to add? I know we've got, Sabrina Davies on the call, who's also a mentor. We've got Steve Pascoe on the call, who's also a mentor. Linda Snell, I saw commenting, who's also one of our mentors. Have you got ideas about what is it about this group of people who can provide support? I mean, this is in a sort of more formal role, but it also sounds like some of the informal stuff is.
I think it's interesting when I talk to the other mentors, they've had much more recent experience of the system or a disaster than I have. So it's 15 years since I took on that role. So I can't talk the detail. In fact, I can't even talk the current language because of the acronyms, the language of recovery. But there's attitudes of mind, and there's approaches, and there's things that don't change. They're fundamental to being a human being and working with other human beings. And there are things that are fundamental, I think, to working with bureaucracies and bureaucrats and so on. I mean, in one of our approaches always in Strathewen still is, most people are there trying to do right by you, and if you tell them how to do it, they'll be better at it. They do want to help, and if you can communicate and guide and all the rest of it, then you'll all be doing a better job. So but you got to have the right mindset. If you're critical and combative, then why would anyone want to listen to you?
Yeah, I think the human side of things is really important, and that I guess for building trust and maintaining trust as well, super important. There's quite a few questions from people in community in roles like both of you have sort of had in a volunteer capacity around what's the best way to work with government agencies. So that there's a lot of questions about local government, state government, and associated agencies. I know you've talked about finding the people who'll help and finding the people who can help with the right things, but hot tips.
Well, Simon said it before. Our experience is you have to find the people. If someone's blocking, well, then you need to find out is there someone else or someone above them who you might be able to talk to. Often people are blocking you because there's a rule, so you need to find the person who knows how the rules get broken, and they'll probably be able to help you to do that.
Yeah, I would add, so regular communication is really important. So you don't want to be the person that only talks to someone when there's something wrong. That's also a good just life skill, I think, for anyone. Don't be scared to reach into different parts of the organisation, like Malcolm said. And finding those doers is a real gold nugget that you want to hang on to. And sometimes a doer will be the conduit to the next doer in the organisation. They kind of know each other, these people. So use the relationships you have, leverage those, escalate when you need to. send out a positive message as much as a negative one as well, though, I think is something maybe we did okay in Sarsfield, lots of success stories, and then from time to time there's a problem. Well, you know, people are willing to help when you're doing good stuff, and that's what you're sort of communicating.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess communication, leadership, finding the right people, finding the right people to leverage and to break the rules or know how to do that. I love that. I guess that's what I'm hearing loud and clear. What would be for both of you, for communities who might not be as far along in terms of the timeline post-recovery, post-disaster, what would be some advice you would have for them, say at the 3-month mark, 6-month mark, 12-month mark, about kind of what are the key things that you, from your experience, were useful at those sort of timelines? And then I'm keen to hear your reflections from the 5-year mark, 10-year mark, 15-year mark. Sorry, it's a big question. So
That's too hard. Forget the 3-month mark. I think we were just starting to, you know, get our act together, and at about the 6-month mark, we had community agreement on having the association. All of these other things that were demanded by, you know, the bushfire machine, we were having to do, but we were still really just getting our act together. I think, and Simon mentioned it before, doing a stock take of what are all the things you've achieved is really important, and sharing it widely, you know, with your community, making sure that people can see the progress that you're actually making, because there's the recovery process takes a long time, and it can look like nothing much is changing until someone gets a house built, but there can be a whole lot of other really important things that may be re-established and that are getting stronger and being well supported, whole lot of things. So I think that stock take is really important. And in our case, we have a commemoration every year, and that is both you know, focuses the mind again on where we've come from, and you know, what's important, all that sort of stuff. So I think identifying those points like you did and doing some things is a good way to help people along to stay on track.
Maybe I would add, like, stick to the basics. Don't overthink stuff as well. So fundamental to our recovery was people coming together. Really, that's the backbone of the whole thing. These, call it Friday night feeds, that's sort of the whole point zero in some respects, I think, for many of our community of what we did. And whether you're doing that after 3 months when people can't have a fridge running because there's no power on still, or you're doing that 3 years, or you're doing that in 5 years, maybe the cadence of when you're doing that changes, but continuing to do those things at work. And we've found that that's part of the journey to people being having better mental health, is actually just being with people who've lived experience and sharing where they're at and their journey. That's something that I would say, yeah, keep doing the things that work. The other thing I would add is really have to be careful to put pegs in the ground around, oh, we should have this done by 3 months. It should be, do it as in the right pace for your community as well. So don't set a goal that you have a community plan within 3 months and then you all feel bad because you didn't achieve that. You know, we're driving these things with volunteer power, and one of those pistons might go, i.e. a person's just not available because they had something unexpected happen. So try to always go forward, but just know that there'll be wobbles because you're dealing with humans and they've got lives and potentially trying to put their lives back together as well post the disaster themselves.
Yeah. On that, how do you ensure so it sounds like it comes really easy to both of you because you're so well connected with your communities, you're meeting with people and having conversations on a daily, weekly basis. So I imagine a lot of the community needs and the priorities raised by community are, you hear that stuff when it is immediate. How do you ensure when working with the various different players, government agencies, support agencies, how do you think your roles in within both your respective community associations help to keep the voice, needs and priorities of communities front and center throughout the years, months and years afterwards? And I'm wondering how you think that'll go for Sarsfield 2030, Simon, if it's not too much of a big question.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this is just like the duck in a pond. Your legs are going so fast, and you're up the top, it's all smiles, and you don't pause to reflect maybe as much as you should. Yeah, I don't know if I have anything crazy meaningful to say. Malcolm, do you have any words of wisdom? This is why a mentor was
No.
good, right?
Well, I reckon, and I think we did it. One of the things you've got to do is show up. So if there's a meeting on, you need some representatives there. If someone's going to turn a sod for something or other, you need to be there, because one, you need, it's a double-edged thing. You need to show appreciation for all these people who think they're doing stuff for you. And at the same time, you need to be in front of them so that they can see what they're doing it for. Or you need to be there so that they think about you when they make the next decision. We came from a place of, well, Strathewen wasn't even mentioned it wasn't on the maps. They didn't know about us virtually, and yet 27 people died there. That sense of you've forgotten and you've been overlooked, making certain that didn't happen again, in whether it's with government or local council or just any sort of activity. So for us, yeah, you need to show up and be as present as you can in other people's minds, and you also need to show how much you appreciate what it is that they're actually doing for you. That's pretty important.
And there is a little Goldilocks thing you can sometimes achieve, which is get someone to co-own something with you. But that's a little bit fraught because they might try to steer it a certain way. But if you can get it just right, and everyone's on the same page, then that's saving the volunteer burden too. If you're doing something together with someone, and they might have resources or whatever as well. So
Yeah, I wouldn't be Red Cross if I didn't ask how you've both managed to look after yourselves and the people around you, because it's a huge job. It's messy, as you're saying, trying to be as present as possible and front and center. What are some of the ways that you think, keep you in it for the long term? Sorry, it's a big putting you on the spot.
well, no one gets everything perfect. And maybe that's one of my shortfalls in this. You try to do everything and you don't get everything right. And sometimes the things that suffer are the things that shouldn't. Not being home, not being the best dad, some of that stuff. I don't think I'm completely off the card in terms of what I achieved there, but that's something that if I had a time machine and went back, I would reprioritize some things. It's really hard when Malcolm's just talking about showing up, and there's a lot of showing up to do, but you absolutely got to get those priorities right, because if you haven't got a support team at home propping you up, it just all the chaos of cards just goes. So that's a reflection for me. I've definitely got that balance back now that I'm not the president and more of a unofficial mentor and that sort of thing on our committee. But yeah, there was lots of people telling us this at the time, but living it and being that person is quite tricky when you're so in something and so committed to trying to get that outcome. And failure is just not an option, and you're letting the community down if you don't go to a meeting. But you know what? That's okay. Sometimes you've got to do that. In my case, we had some stuff. My wife got breast cancer. Righto, that's it. We're not going to do this the same way anymore. And so there was a recalibration in our house. And sometimes you need things like that to recalibrate, but shouldn't really. You should think like that from the get-go. Over to you, Malcolm.
Yeah, my partner Diana and I put our life on hold for a number of years while we did that sort of work before we actually built our house. And I couldn't see any particular ways around it. We had a great committee. People shared the load in all sorts of ways, but there's a lot of load, a lot of things to do. And so, yes, I think it was really difficult. And that's, in our succession sort of plan, I think that was the hard stuff about how you might get out of that and still have some of those things continue on. So I have no tips, none, zilch.
Well, I guess for people listening and thinking about how to support people in communities volunteering their time where failure is not an option, about, I guess, how to make it as easy for volunteers and community leaders like you guys as possible to be able to participate and be able to participate meaningfully and be able to drive community-led recovery, because that is huge personal sacrifice, time, energy. So it's better be worth it, right?
That I can give you some tips on. If you're a funder, then you should be funding people to work for committees, whether that's their providing them with treasurer support or secretarial support or social media support, all of those sorts of things that people are either going to have to learn the skills for, or they know a bit, but it's going to be really stressful. That sort of stuff is really important. It'd be great if it was funded by government. And the other thing is, those people, they need to work for the committee, not for the council. There's some great people that have worked for council doing that, but they're always drawn away by the business of the organisation they work in. Whereas if someone's been funded and you can get them, I was going to say employ them, but you don't want to do that. If they can be employed through the council, but they're working for you, that can make a huge difference to the workload of committees.
Yeah, we're living that right now. So we've had the full different models from the get-go of people, place managers from both Bushfire Recovery Victoria, now ERV, council. Most recently, we're so lucky, and I don't know who's on the call, but shout out to FRRR who funded us to have a support worker working for us directly. The support worker is auspiced through our council, but they work for us. They work in our environment. They use our emails, and the productivity is much higher, not because of the person, but because of the system. Like Malcolm said, they're not sucked up in all the other things they have to do. They're when they turn up to work, they're working on our priorities with limited oversight from council, and it's a real success. And I know for the people out there who might set this up, they feel like there's risks. These community, can they do this? Yeah, I think if you trust in the community, you'll get a really good outcome, and not going to waste resources or whatever. It really can lead to some great outcomes. But the other side of that coin, if that was taken away right now, the momentum would really grind down. If it was on us, the community, to be doing a lot of that heavy lifting in the background, yeah, the progress would be much slower.
Thank you both. Look, there's so many comments coming in from people on the call, just saying how much they've appreciated this, how inspired they are. Thank you both for sharing your wisdom today. Thank you both for the work you've done with your communities, and then also by passing the baton on for communities who are still coming along this journey. And I think this will be a really awesome resource for communities who hopefully will be able to get some really interesting insights and take homes from today. I think really for me, thinking about the personal toll this kind of work can do for community members, that finding people to help you navigate the system together, the pride you both obviously have in the incredible changes that you guys have done in your communities it's inspiring me. That's about all we have time for today. So on behalf of the Australian Red Cross and the Australian Institute of Disaster Resilience, a massive thank you, Simon and Malcolm. An email will be sent out with the recording from today's session, and it will be housed on the ADAR Knowledge Hub. So if you have friends, family, colleagues who you think would benefit from this, send it their way. There'll be a short survey. This helps us design for these types of sessions for future, and help us keep developing events that you guys want to hear about. So thank you so much. As not usual, it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you again.